This is AgGrad Live,
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
the show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry,
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day.
My name is Tim Hamrich. I'm one of the founders of AgGrad, and we are there at my favorite time every week where we get to pause from the normal course of doing business and just sit down and have a conversation with somebody doing exciting things in some aspect of agriculture, the food system in general. And these have been especially interesting since we started profiling our AgGrad 30 under 30, which this is the very first year we have launched that program to highlight impressive individuals who are doing great work in agriculture before their 30th birthday. We actually, while I'm talking about that, have opened the nominations up for next year. So if you know anybody that you read the list this year and you're thinking, ooh, this other person also belongs on that list, make sure you nominate them for next year. And you could do that at 30under30.ag. That's the number. So 30, the word under, then 30.ag. So make sure you do that. But we have on the show today one of those 30 under 30 for the very first inaugural class, Lynn Moore. Lynn, I'll bring you on. Thanks for being on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Tim.
Well, I have been looking forward to this really since we started these interviews because you have such an interesting background and probably an interesting take on agriculture because you're coming at it from more of the consumer side. So maybe just for starters, I'll let you introduce yourself to the audience here and tell us about kind of what you do and where you're located.
Sure. So as Tim mentioned, so I'm Lynn. I am in the Cleveland, Ohio area. So I work for Nestle in research and development now. My title is an ideation specialist. So I'm working on kind of the front end of ideas, looking at, if something maybe is a little rusty, how can we polish it? How can we find an idea that is something we can really pull forward and then start product developing and then launching those products down to the consumer side. I got to this space because I entered food science as my degree. So I went to the Ohio State University, go Buckeyes, and I studied there for food science with a minor in agricultural communications. So my kind of journey from there, originally I grew up on a tomato farm in Northwest Ohio, so I have agricultural roots. Tomato farming is a very unique, interesting process to learn. And then I actually in high school, I started working at the tomato farm that my dad grows tomatoes for. So I was able to really connect the field to then the next step of processing those tomatoes, which is why I kind of landed in food science. I did an internship when I was in college at Smith Dairy in Northeast Ohio. So I was able to see a very different side of the industry as well. My favorite part of that internship was definitely ice cream tasting twice a week. Got to make sure it tastes good, right? And then after that, I finished out my junior year and got an internship with Nestle in the Cleveland area, so where I'm at now. So they offered a product development internship for 3 months and then offered me a full-time position then once I finished that internship. So right out of university with my degree, I was able to go into a product development role. I've had a few different roles within Nestle since I've been here for about 8 years. For 3 years, I was still in that product development role, focusing mostly on our frozen and refrigerated foods brands. So that's what's headquartered in that Cleveland, Ohio location. So the brands Stouffer's or DiGiorno, Lean Cuisine, if you've obviously maybe tried them or heard of them. I was launching the Lean Cuisine products for about 3 years. Then I was given an opportunity to move to Germany. Actually, there's a research and development location that Nestle has for its global brands in the ambient business, so more of the shelf staples or soup mixes, cooking aids. So I was able to do a 1-year assignment there, and then since then moved back to the R&D role in Solon again, and have been there ever since with a quick 6-month stint last year in San Francisco. So we have a innovation outpost in San Francisco where we'd be working and connecting with startups and understanding possible new businesses and that we can maybe partner or start to explore it and experiment with. So I've done a lot of different things, and now I'm kind of still in the research and development exploratory space.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, I want to get back to, there's several things in there I want to talk more about on the show here today. But first, I want to get back to the power of an internship. I was just on campus at the University of Arkansas last week, and a big part of my message was like, you don't realize how life-changing an internship can be. For you, you actually interned with a company you've been with for how many years now? I think, do you say 7 years?
Yeah, 8 years. Yeah.
8 years. Did you know how about as far as the type of work you wanted to do when you went into your food science degree? Did you know you wanted to end up in R&D for a company like Nestle, or how did the internship play a factor there?
So the internship was what taught me what I really enjoyed, and maybe those things that were less of my passion. So 100% I believe in the power of the internship. When I was at the tomato factory, essentially that was also my first internship. It got me into food science and really taught me what different aspects of the industry, different aspects of manufacturing. For that one specifically, I could see a very closer and to the field side of manufacturing, so processing something that's coming straight out of the field. When I was in the dairy internship, I was able to see more of a fluid processing. I was in the quality group when I was an intern at Smith Dairy, and so I was able to see kind of a different aspect then of more quality assurance and testing, making sure that if they're making 2% milk, that it actually is 2% milk. And then when I was at Nestle, I was able to see the product development side, so working in a test kitchen or working on recipes. So I could see kind of 3 very distinct aspects of the industry, which is essentially what you want to learn and where you want to explore. So that's what did get me into Nestle, but it's not saying that that was the only career path then I could take. It gave me an angle, and then once I was able to learn a little more about Nestle as a full-time employee, I could explore what areas I really wanted to continue to pursue.
Cool. What about the degree of food science? I imagine, I mean, it seems just like agriculture, like it seems so broad, you can go a million different directions. Is it more about diet? Is it more about food processing? Is it, it just seems like there's a lot more about quality or food safety. Do you touch on all of that in a food science degree program, or, what is it primarily focused on? And I imagine maybe there's some misnomers out there from those of us who weren't food science majors of what we think it might be about.
Right. So it is a combination of all those areas that you mentioned. So as an entry level, you're looking at chemistries, you're looking at biologies, you're looking at the sciences. It's going to give you the basis. And then you start looking at food chemistry, food microbiology, food safety specifically. And then there are some of those processing classes that you'd be exploring, perhaps how you might do certain vegetable processing. There's at Ohio State, they do have a pilot plant, which is pretty common for most programs, that you can learn how to can green beans and process tomatoes like I already had learned. So areas that you can learn manufacturing aspects of the business, maybe even food engineering, but then also the food safety side. And a lot of my colleagues also went into research and development at the university level, so you can continue to explore for a master's or PhD, maybe specializing in food microbiology or food chemistry. So there's a lot of different areas, and that was where, as I mentioned with the internship, it was really critical to understand what areas you specifically have passion for. If you're looking for maybe that creative, exploratory, where you're really looking at recipes and ingredients, then perhaps the product development road would be a specific area. But then there's also a nutrition focus as well that you can take an understanding for and really pair with either the nutrition science and understanding kind of what more from a maybe even dietetics level you can look at. So it purely depends on what you're interested in and how you can explore that.
Yeah, it seems like the field is probably becoming not to say it ever wasn't, but it's probably becoming increasingly more scientific. I mean, I just think about all the biological and chemical processes that we maybe have access to now that maybe we didn't before. How do you kind of keep up to date with the rapidly changing landscape in food science? I mean, do you have a systematic way of doing that?
So a lot of it, I'm always watching trends. I'm always kind of exploring grocery stores, always kind of being aware of what some of the different updates are, whether that's reading newsletters or kind of industry reports. So because I'm on more of the consumer side of products, I'm less on focusing on the manufacturing side of it at the moment with my current role. Right, it's a lot of trends. It's looking at diets, it's looking at nutrition, and then also thinking about health trends at a larger scale. If we're thinking about diabetes and heart disease, and how are eating trends and nutrition patterns going to be impacted with kind of these bigger issues. So for me, it's kind of just always keeping up to date with what's going on in the industry itself, as well as at a consumer level.
Great. And I picture a food scientist like in a lab with a lab coat looking at samples. Is that how we should picture a food scientist, or how should those of us who, think about your field of study be thinking about, what the day-to-day looks like for someone in your role?
Sure. So sometimes it is in a lab coat working on, putting together a recipe. A lot of the times I'm partnering with our chefs that we have at work, and it's very culinary. It's very experiential, and if we're cooking a pizza and we're trying to make different recipes of the cheese and the sauce and the dough and all these things that combine. So in my mind, it's the chef pairing with the nutritionist, pairing with the food scientist who knows how to pull it all together. And kind of that window is a lot of what I work in. But then I'm also partnering with my food safety partners, regulatory partners, even purchasing, so finding and procuring all those ingredients. And then the engineers that help us bring it all together. There's packaging specialists as well, so people who are helping us pull it all together in a package that's going to protect the food and make sure that food stays safe throughout its shelf life. So there's a lot of different aspects to making sure that the product that you're seeing at the store is something that you really can both enjoy, and then also will keep you well nourished.
And I know you said you went to Germany for, I think, maybe a year. Did you know when you took the job that might be coming, that you might get this opportunity in Germany? Because I find a lot of people would like to have that experience, but it isn't usually something you see like posted on a job posting, like, hey, you'll get to spend a year in Germany if you want. How did that opportunity come about? And did you know beforehand that might be something available to you?
Right. And so I think I had voiced with my manager at the time that I was open to many different opportunities if they came about. I spoke with my husband, prior in career conversations, that is something like this something he'd be open to, or would be something we could explore. And so I more or less made it known that I would be interested if something like this came up. Obviously, it kind of needs to be specific opportunities. You understand, is that a benefit for me? Am I going to grow through that opportunity? But 100% when it came about, it was something we both jumped on and decided that was the right thing to do. In the end, actually, it was a little more challenging because the way that specific assignment worked, because it was 1 year, my husband was unable to join me. So he stayed in the US, and then I moved there, and then we were able to kind of commute back and forth every 8 weeks. So that was a little more challenging than we originally anticipated, but it was something we both wanted to do, and we wanted it to work out, that I could have that experience. So for someone looking for that type of experience, it wasn't something posted on a job board. It wasn't something that someone was posting around and sharing. And I know there was a lot of conversations I had with my manager to make sure that we knew it was the right opportunity, or we knew it would be an opportunity that I could grow with. So my advice would be kind of just be aware of what you're looking for, and then have the right network helping you look for those opportunities.
Yeah, what a cool opportunity, though. I just think that's really, really cool. And I think, like you said, a lot of people don't realize that you've got to establish yourself and show that you're worth the investment on the company's part to have something like that afforded to you. But that's fantastic.
Right. And this opportunity was actually a training opportunity. So I was able to not only kind of learn with the team there in Germany, but then bring that knowledge back to the team in the US. So it gave me a really good opportunity to learn, but then also have a way to apply it back. And just seeing the food industry at a whole different global level was is very eye-opening. When you see it at a US level and you see it at the kind of agricultural level, it's so different when you see a global level trading or global level procurement. It's a whole different world.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about that, because how has your perspective changed from growing up on a farm, a tomato farm, and to now seeing sort of, the entire value chain of the food system? If you could go back and tell yourself when you only saw your kind of local farm agriculture, what's in your backyard, to broaden your view of what's happening in the food system, what would you tell that person? Because I think that's a lot of us, that we only really see our local agriculture. So I would love to hear how your perspective has changed on that.
Sure. I think one of the biggest, it was a huge shock for me to move to Germany. So that was the first time I'd ever moved outside of Ohio. So it was to move and decide to leave the country and leave the language that you're comfortable with. It was a very, very humbling experience to be able to do that. And where I think I felt a lot of comfort was that I was with a company that was able to support me and grow with me. And so I could do that kind of with them supporting my back. So it helped make sure that transition was different. And when you're internationally, I think just thinking about in Europe, especially the different languages, different regulatory impacts of all the different food, the way that they're transporting food across country lines, or we're transporting food across state lines. There's a lot of different complications there, and they're a lot older of a I don't want to say nation, but a unit that farms are smaller versus some of the farm sizes that are here. Yeah. So it's just a very different kind of approach to agriculture. Now, I didn't get as close to the production side level while I was in Germany, since I was more seeing it on the finished goods side. But it's definitely a whole different kind of eye-opening experience that I would even encouraging people to go on a vacation if they're exploring some of these different countries, to see the countryside, see what's growing. If you can see, I would always get off the plane in Switzerland and be amazed by the sunflower fields that you're driving past, or the canola fields that is bright yellow. And it was kind of a surreal experience when you're used to seeing corn and soy.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really, really cool. One question I'm always just curious about in these conversations is sort of the basic question is how do you know you're doing a good job? Like what are your deliverables in your work? And how can you tell, like, okay, I'm performing well for my employer? I'm from like a merchandising background, and so it was always like we knew at the end of the day whether we made profitable trades or we didn't. And so I'm always curious in other people's professions kind of what that's like.
I mean, you definitely can understand if people are providing really positive feedback on a recipe. People are, we always kind of joked around that in the development process, you knew a product was good if it was finished, the complete plate was finished at the end of a panel or at the end of a tasting. So people always went back for seconds. You kind of knew that, all right, you're in a good space. I mean, we can always look at the kind of traditional sales metrics and how fast is it selling, how are we getting consumer complaints, or are we getting positive feedback? So there's a couple different ways of getting that feedback, but I think it's more kind of seeing the consumer reaction is the part that for me is the most rewarding and the most satisfying, and that's what's going to kind of keep you coming back, because you're making a difference in someone's life, because you're helping them get dinner on the table, you're helping them kind of make sure that they can get to soccer practice on time. And so you're seeing those little things you can make an impact with. And I think on more of the kind of career internal side, how you're making a difference, for me, I set the bar pretty high for myself, obviously. And if I can really get that positive feedback from either my peers or my manager, that feedback is really what's always going to be giving me that constant motivation to keep going. That if they're seeing value that I'm adding, then that's positive reinforcement that I can keep doing what I'm doing. If I'm not maybe seeing that positive feedback as much, then I need to change and retrigger how I'm focusing my priorities.
Right. Yeah. What from the outside looking in, it's always hard to see kind of what a job is really like. So for you, what do you find most challenging about the work you do? which part is the hard part that most people wouldn't see?
So because I kind of work in the very front end, I'm working on ideas that really aren't an idea yet. So it's very, very fuzzy. So sometimes for me, it's really hard to understand if I'm on the right track or if I'm kind of completely off on the other side, because things are so fuzzy. Some things we have to understand, is it the product, or is it about the story that we're telling, or the way that we're pitching a product, or the way that we're pitching it to our stakeholders. So I think those are kind of the different things that on a day-to-day basis I'm trying to make sure that I'm fine-tuning and getting the messaging right to ensure that we're on the right path and don't need to pivot.
Yeah. It seems like, for you, having been at Nestle, well, even before you graduated college, because you interned there, and then I guess then were hired full time. You've been there a while now. Have you noticed, like, have many of your peers sort of changed jobs, and you've kind of stayed with it? It seems like you've been more committed and maybe a longer lasting employee than most people in their 20s, which is a great thing, reflecting on you and Nestle. But tell me about that.
So I have seen some turnover. I've seen people change either roles or change. We have a pretty horizontal organization, so I have seen people kind of jump to different groups as well. So it's always good to see kind of that same community that I came in with, to see them across the organization, and your network just starts to keep spreading. There are quite a few that would maybe have went to another company or went to other locations, but I think the reason I've probably stayed is I've put in a lot of effort and really made a network within the company, and I think that that's helped me navigate and really understand kind of where I can add value. And so, and not only that, but the location that I'm currently at in Northwest Ohio or Northeast Ohio, it gets me 3 hours away from my home family. So that distance isn't too large in the grand scheme of things. So I'm enjoying kind of being in Ohio, but then also having more of a global footprint with a larger company. I've been able to travel kind of all over, not only in Germany, but all over the US at different factories or different projects. So it's really been able to open the door for me to see other things, but then yet I can still be home on the weekend and see my family as well.
Perfect. Has there been any advice that has been particularly useful for you in your career so far, or just any advice that you would like to share with other young professionals looking to advance their own careers?
I think this message maybe already have come across, but I had a mentor in college who told me one time that your first job gets your second job, and then your second job gets your third job, and your third job gets your fourth job. And so when I chose food science, I was very, very set on it. I was very set on it in high school, very determined that was what I was going to do. And then there was moments, where you're going to a class and it's a little more challenging. It's not really clicking exactly the way you want. And I would question, is this the right field for me? And I think that advice from that mentor, that I was able to kind of get that first job, but that doesn't mean that I have to stick with that one topic or that one career choice for the rest of my life. And I've definitely seen that come to fruition, that I can pivot in areas that I see either drive more of my passion, or as I've learned new things and grown more, I can start to kind of understand where I can maybe move to. Do I want to move to a marketing role? Do I want to move to a purchasing role? Other things that I maybe can see an open door more now than I would have when I was first graduating college. So I think it's definitely keep an open mind, that you can keep exploring, that your one decision is not your forever decision.
And you chose to minor in ag communications as an undergrad. How did that come about, and has that helped you at all in your career success so far?
So I minored in it because I was just interested in the topic. I was starting to see that the ways we can connect to our consumer and connect people to their food was through communication, obviously. Food science is not, as you mentioned, there's a lot of appearances if we're in a lab coat in a lab, and so I didn't see as much of that connection to communication and to the consumer. So I majored in it to understand, are there ways that we can reach out, are there ways that we can connect? I haven't necessarily used that on a day-to-day basis, But I think that it really was something at the university level that drove my passion, that I want to connect people to their food. I want to connect people to where their food comes from. And I think I do that kind of on a day-to-day basis throughout my role, whether it's communication or if it's just kind of creating new products that will inspire new people.
Great. Well, I know this is a big question, but if there was one thing you could tell the average consumer, about their food right now, is there any particular message you would want to share?
I'd want to say get involved. I want people to understand, the satisfaction that if you put a seed in the ground and you start to see it grow and you nourish it and then you can harvest something with that. I think it just creates a whole different connection. As more and more trends are going towards more experiential learning and experience, getting hands-on, I think that agriculture and education with agricultural needs to go in that same direction. If we're able to get students touching the dirt and seeing that it's okay to get your hands dirty and that you can, maybe you have to pull a weed or two, but it's something, if they can see at a very small level, then it takes away some of that mystery. And I think that will help us in the long run from a communication standpoint, that we won't have to be fighting different conversations of, is it very black and white? Is this good? Is this bad? Should we eat organic or only conventional? There's all these conversations and we're approaching them now as very black and white. But I see that if we can get an educational component, then we can start to talk more about that middle ground.
Very cool. Well, Lynn Wishmeyer-Moore, one of our AgGrad 30 Under 30, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us here today. If there's any social media platform or anybody watching or listening that wants to get in touch with you because your job sounds really interesting, what would be the best way they could either follow along with your journey or get in touch?
Get in touch with me through LinkedIn. I am on some of the social media channels. I'm a little quieter sometimes, but I think if you want to get in touch with me, find me on LinkedIn.
All right, fine, Lynn, on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, I was excited to talk to a food scientist because I find this stuff so fascinating. And there's a lot I don't know about how our food is ultimately produced as it goes through the value chain. So thank you very much. And for those of you listening or watching, if you want to nominate someone for next year's 30 Under 30, make sure you go to 30under30.ag. And we'll be back next week. We just have, I think, 2 left of the 30 Under 30 for this year. So we're wrapping things up. And thanks for tuning in. And thank you again, Lynn. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com. That's AGGRAD. To join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.